there's been a busy Fever off season, a busy week in general. So I thought it was kind of long overdue to jump on here and have a conversation about the Fever and what's happening with them, all the different directions that they are headed, and the different news items that have happened this week. My plan is to record this goal is to do this live like a podcast, which I will then post on my Fieldhouse Files podcast. I do plan to answer some of these questions as well throughout. So if you do have something, feel free to put it in here. However, I'm going to try to bounce back and forth and kind of share my thoughts with everything and then mix in some questions here. I'm glad I'm sounding okay. I'm glad you're hearing me now. And yeah, I think we should get to it here, but appreciate everyone joining me. If you don't know, I'm Scott Agness. I've covered the Fever for quite a while. I've been around them since 2003 and covering them since 2012. Now, especially with more interest in them than probably any other WNBA and most NBA franchises out there, thanks to Caitlin Clark as well. I had a good time a couple months ago going down to Florida where she played in that golf tournament, so that was a lot of fun. But without further ado, I want to get into it here on this podcast just because I know I do have a lot of ground I want to cover. And so we'll get right to it here. Thanks again to everybody who joins. And if you didn't know, my primary work is over at fieldhousefiles.com, where you can subscribe and to do all that with me. I'd encourage you to do so. So we're going to go and get this thing started. On this episode of the Fieldhouse Files podcast, so much to discuss on the Indiana Fever's offseason. Kelsey Mitchell, Natasha Howard, Caitlin Clark's big weekend and a special game for her, Stephanie White being awarded, plus several Fever individuals were at the recent Pacers game. And welcome in to a special edition of this Fieldhouse Files podcast. I'm also recording it live on YouTube to interact with so many of you on theirs. I just thought it was a key time right now in this Fever offseason to discuss what is going on with the franchise, the new leadership. There is wholesale changes, a complete overhaul of this franchise. A franchise when Caitlin Clark was drafted into in April of last year, very different, especially right up there at the top with new president, new GM, new head coach, almost entirely new coaching staff, some new support staff as well. So many things I'm going to touch on here to get things started on this podcast. If you didn't know already, you can see all my work at fieldhousefiles.com and, of course, this Fieldhouse Files podcast. Let's start with some different news. You may have missed this, but I found it was interesting that this week the Fever got a new communications individual, Jackie Maynard, coming over from the NWSL and Major League Soccer. She's going to now lead this program after Ryan Stevens had done a terrific job of doing that for 5 seasons. I was disappointed to see Ryan move on because I thought he had done so many good things for this franchise. I understand them bringing on additional support, and Jackie plans to hire a PR manager to assist her. That job posting was listed about a week ago, but a very sad, disappointed to see them move on from Ryan. Most of you may not know this, but Ryan actually chose to move on from the Fever a couple of years ago, and they asked him to come back. He did such a good job, had great knowledge for the franchise and all of that, and had done a nice job of advocating for the franchise. Until Caitlin Clark arrived, you barely got much coverage with the Indiana Fever, right? There was little interest. It was a team that won 4 games in 10 games and hadn't reached the playoffs since 2016 when Tamika Catchings was last year. But I'm excited to meet Jackie and get to know her as she heads up the communications. Associate Vice President is her title. She got started on Monday, so this week has been week 1 for her over at the Ascension St. Vincent Center and working with the Indiana Fever. It's always good, I believe, to bring in fresh blood, to bring in new perspective. I just wish it could have been done in a way where maybe Ryan could have stayed along as well. I mean, he was a guy that won the inaugural Val Ackerman Award given out by our Pro Basketball Writers Association each year, starting last year, I guess, to be fair, to recognize the best PR director for a team in the WNBA. And guess what? He was a nominee again this year. It was won by the New York Liberty's head of PR. He was brought in by the WNBA to work the WNBA finals last year. So just disappointed by that, but excited to meet Jackie and hear her vision and see how she operates as you bring fresh blood into the franchise. Now, for basketball in particular news, this is probably where we need to start, and that's with Kelsey Mitchell. I'm not surprised at all that the Fever were able to re-sign her and that she re-signed here. It was clearly, they made it abundantly clear to us, to the public, in at press conferences that re-signing Kelsey Mitchell was priority number one for this new front office, for Stephanie White returning back to the franchise, heading it up. Very important. And they were able to get that done. And so that secures this Fever backcourt at least for another year of Kelsey Mitchell and with Caitlin Clark. So that's important to get things started. It was about 2 weeks ago when the Fever initially issued a core franchise tag, as many of you might be familiar with. Basically court her, which gives them exclusive negotiating rights. And then ultimately deciding to do a 1-year Supermax deal. They could core her next year again, should they want to. And so this will be something that will be something we'll be tracking after this next season. But there's going to be a lot of changes, I think, in the WNBA, as you've already seen the players opt out of the collective bargaining agreement after this upcoming season. Does not impact the current season, but I think you'll see enhancements and player amenities and offerings they have at the facilities. I think you'll see increased rookie scale pay. I think you'll see increased pay across the board as this influx of TV money comes in. I think it's almost $200 million for sure right now as part of the NBA deal. And then you're going to see more money as well, where they'll probably re-up with Ion, I would suspect, and do some other TV media deals as well, in addition to what they've already agreed to as part of the NBA's TV package. It's kind of odd now that they're combined. I'd like to see those separate, much like the women's Final Four and the men's Final Four, a little bit differently there. But Kelsey Mitchell will be back. She signed her deal on Wednesday. She returned here from China, where she's spending the offseason. I know the Fever really wanted to make a point in bringing her back. They wanted to go visit her, see how she felt. Obviously, they were in control of her contract, given that they could core her like many other players out there across the league. But that's a one-way street. You want to make sure with this new regime that it's mutual respect, that there's mutual interest to return, because the last thing you want to do is have a player under contract, certainly at a Supermax, the highest contract there is in the WNBA, and her not to be here, or her not to be fully invested. So I think that was important conversations that Kelsey had to have with the leadership, with head coach Stephanie White, hear her vision for both the team and how she will be utilized and highlighted, and be able to maximize her game and this team moving forward. Again, it's a 1-year deal, and that's what you're going to primarily see with all these free agent key players get 1-year deals, because nobody knows what it's going to look like after this year. And so why would you want to sign a 3-year deal, lock in money that's probably in all likelihood much less than they will be able to sign for after a new collective bargaining agreement is agreed to. Kelsey's coming off a career year. She's a veteran in this league, has all kinds of experience except for playoff experience, but she finally played in her first playoff game this past season with the team in September. Only 2 playoff games, both in Connecticut. I was there to cover it. That's the one thing she does not have, but she has a lot of experience overseas. And of course, she's been with the Fever from the jump. She has been through the lowest of lows for the Fever. So if anything, I'm glad now she's going to start experiencing these highs, that she's on the national TV and getting the attention that she deserves. And the fact that if she sticks around another year, she'll be able in 2026 to enjoy this new practice facility that the Fever recently announced their plans to do. So that's telling as well. I thought that was important. Here's a quote from new/older team president Kelly Krauskopf, returning to her old role as chief architect of this franchise. Quote, "You can watch games from last year and see that the backcourt of her and Clark are about as good as you can get in the league." That's what she told me when we talked recently a couple months ago. And she, they had fully intended on bringing her back. They just wanted to have conversations with her, see where she stood, see what her priorities were, and clearly they were able to meet there because it was a lot to play for this Fever franchise. You are under a microscope. This is a big challenge, and so it's not for everybody. It's not going to be for everyone, and that's fine. It's just important for these players and for these free agents that sign with the Fever, recognize what they're getting themselves into. It's not for everyone, and you have to be patient and understanding of what is going on. After Kelsey Mitchell, the primary focus then shifted to adding size, to adding experience. They needed more veteran. It was a younger team, an inexperienced team. You had a starting five last year they rolled out in the playoffs who did not have any experience in the postseason. So, one, they got some, but just very little. Hadn't played in those big game experiences, even though this year they had the big crowd, big attention, and all of that. They did not play in those meaningful playoff games where things tighten up. The pressure is felt, where you're playing the same team 2, 3, 4 times in a row potentially. But they really needed an upgrade at the 3 and at the 4 spot. Add some size, agility, length, defense in particular. And I think they accomplished some of that here today. Some of you in the comments here on YouTube Live did not see. Natasha Howard has reached agreement with the Indiana Fever to come back to the franchise where she got things started. She even tweeted about her excitement to return where things got started. She was the 5th overall pick in 2014. It was a lot of familiarity between Natasha Howard and with this Fever franchise, both the city and Kelly Krauskopf. She was the one that drafted her. We saw last year Natasha Howard spend the last 2 years actually in Dallas. Well, that's where current GM Amber Cox previously was at. So she knows Natasha. There's the familiarity there as well. Stephanie White. She was the head coach when Natasha Howard's kind of career getting started here. And so there's familiarity there and comfort. She's a veteran. She's 33 years old. She has 53 playoff games of experience. That is significant. Have not heard the terms of the deal just yet, but as I outlined earlier, I suspect this and mostly all are one-year deals here. She's a 3-time champion. She's a 2-time All-Star, former Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. So to me, she checks all these boxes that Stephanie White and this front office were looking for this offseason, where they wanted that experience, where they wanted a player with know-how, and who's been around the league. I think this is her 5th franchise. So she knows what things are like elsewhere. She knows how things are handled. She knows how to run a locker room. She knows what it takes come the playoffs, and the Fever certainly should be back in the playoffs. We'll try to push to become a contending roster this year. It might be 1 year too early, but the thing I appreciate about this Fever front office, and it really starts with Pacers Sports and Entertainment President Mel Raines, who took over from Rick Fuson officially in June, is they are not content. They are not taking it easy. They are not settling in at all to the Caitlin Clark experience. No, they are going all in. Now, they're having probably revenues that they have never experienced, that no team in this league has experienced. And I think it's also fascinating right now that in large part, it's got to be the part of the Caitlin Clark effect. It feels like each day there's a new city announcing its plans to put in a bid for an expansion franchise. We saw Tennessee with the Tennessee Summit. That's telling, I think. You've seen, I think Cleveland's interested. And several other different Detroit, I think I read today, is interested in the franchise. How about that? 3 years ago, there was probably no cities truly interested. Now you've going to start this upcoming season with 2 more franchises with one more with Golden State joining the fold. And then the next year you'll have Toronto joining the mix with Portland. And then they need to add at least 1 more franchise to make it an easy 16. And I'm not sure if you go beyond that, quite frankly. 16 is a good number. I think you want to make sure not to do too much and grow too fast. I think you need to have a steady incline, especially when so much seems to revolve around Caitlin Clark and this younger crop of players. Can this continue? How long does it last? Or is it there for the long run? And yeah, there's a good point. Is there enough talent really to field a 16-team league? I'm not so certain about that. That's one of my hesitations. Should the NBA presumably here expand in a couple of years with with Las Vegas and Seattle. At some point, you dilute the product. So that's something these executives have to be certainly conscious of. But again, Natasha Howard can't sign her new deal until February 1st. That's where that is the date for these new free agents to that they can sign. Kelsey Mitchell was able to because she was a returning player here for the Fever franchise, and it was so good to see her and Stephanie White. They sat courtside on Wednesday 2 days ago as the Pacers played the Pistons, and they were just sitting over there having a great conversation for what seemed like the majority of the game. The video board highlighted her, and the Pacer fans gave her great support. She's used to bigger crowds than that this season, right? With the Fever where they sell out everywhere, but that had to be cool for her, a player who has been here for 7 years. She's going to continue on for at least an 8th year, and then we'll see, right? If I'm a player like her after this upcoming season, I want a long-term deal. I want stability. I want to know what I can expect moving forward. But it's hard to say much more beyond that until we know what this new CBA looks like. We know where it's advantageous and what both the team and the players can take advantage of. The key thing for the Fever right now is you have Caitlin remarkably cheap. You have trading cards that are selling for over $100,000, and Caitlin's making probably $80,000 after bonuses for Rookie of the Year, first team All WNBA, for being an All-Star, all those different things. But those bonuses, those are small. Those are $5,000. Those are $1,000 if she was, participating in a 3-point contest, and she's not. That's something I'll get into here in just a moment. But these higher salaries will be interesting, and the players are wanting for that to match the TV money that the WNBA is getting. But I think it's also important to note how, as of now, the WNBA has not turned a profit. They're still in reinvesting mode. They're still in growth mode. So they have not yet turned a profit just yet. Thanks to everyone who has joined me here on a YouTube Live, seeing all your comments. I'll get to some of them here in just a bit. A few more things that I want to cover here on this live podcast recording. Again, you can read all my work, a lot of my thoughts at fieldhousefiles.com. On Thursday, I thought it was really interesting and smart and savvy what the Fever are doing and what they officially announced, and that's to add a additional preseason date. They already announced two versus the Mystics at Atlanta. That's over like May 3rd and May 10th, over a week. You get 2 games in. Well, they've added another, and that's going to be a special one. It's a homecoming for Caitlin Clark on May 4th, a Sunday in Iowa City. They're going to take the team to Carver-Hawkeye Arena and play the Brazilian national team. It's inevitably going to be a sellout. It'll probably sell out in the same hour that tickets go on sale. Now, tickets will be facilitated and run, they say, by the University of Iowa. There's going to be a lot of fans that are upset that maybe they are local there in Iowa and can't get tickets, or maybe they're season ticket holders. We do not yet know what it's going to look like, how those will be distributed. I hope there's perhaps a student section. I think that would be really cool. But I'm sure maybe if anything, it'll be to a smaller group, and there's going to be, 16,000 fans that want to be there and be there at that game. So we'll see how that shakes out. It's being run and organized by a third-party company, but the Fever have a 1 p.m. game on May 3rd, a preseason here at home against the Washington Mystics, and then they'll take that charter flight to probably Cedar Rapids, and then get to Iowa City to play the Brazilian national team. And I thought it was also interesting that then a day later, here today, the Chicago Sky announcing that they will do something basically similar. They, on the May 3rd, May 2nd, that is, rather, they will go to LSU and play that same Brazilian national team, affording Angel Reese the opportunity to play in front of her LSU fans and go back there. And I thought that was really cool. So well done by both franchises. Great job by the Fever. It's such a good idea. No brainer, really. It quite frankly just comes to execution. It comes down to disruption in the Fever's preseason schedule. It kind of burns a day and a half or 2 days. You got to plan out security. It's a whole new environment. You've never really had a WNBA game there. You have seen that sometimes in the pro league. I remember back when I was a ball boy years ago, back in 2009 for the Pacers had a home game against the San Antonio Spurs that they had down in Bloomington, an hour south of the Fieldhouse, where they played the Spurs at IU's Assembly Hall. And that was a lot of fun. That was unique. The point of that was in a downtime for the franchise to expose them to students, to expose them to the southern part of the state. So I thought that was a fantastic move by the Fever to schedule this game at Iowa, gives them another preseason date. It'll be a sellout. Yes, I know so many of Caitlin fans and Fever fans are pushing, hey, can you move this to Kinnick Stadium where they play football, where there's almost 56,000 seats that they set the single game attendance record around this time about 16 months ago against DePaul. I included that in my write-up at fieldhousefiles.com. Caitlin had a triple-double. It was a successful day. It was an outdoor game in women's college basketball, so I thought that was an impressive feat. The challenge is, May, what's the weather look like? Is it rainy? Anything like that? Also, I think it's better to have it in a constrained area inside of an arena. Security risks, to be clear, as well. But there's no doubt in my mind that those 55,000 seats would be sold out if you did open it up, although I have not heard for any plans to do any of that at this moment. But a special opportunity. And as Kelly Krauskopf said, she said, we quote, "We couldn't be more excited to play at Carver-Hawkeye Arena, and we know Iowa fans will deliver an unforgettable homecoming for Caitlin." And yeah, they absolutely will. I'm sure the Iowa team will be involved in some way, whether it's sitting behind the Fever bench or, maybe they're shooting shots at halftime to entertain the Iowa-centric crowd, etc. That will be cool. Now, one other thing with Caitlin in Iowa, by the way, is Caitlin will return this weekend to Iowa City, to her alma mater, where she was just so important to that program and became the NCAA's all-time leading scorer. In the last 2 years, took them to the NCAA title game, and has a spot on the court for the total amount of points that she has scored, setting that NCAA record. Well, Iowa, no brainer. They announced it months ago, but they're retiring her number 22 Iowa jersey. So Caitlin will be celebrated back at Iowa this weekend, and you can watch it. You can watch the whole ceremony as well. I think it's smart here for Fox. Big Fox will be televising this event, and so that makes all kinds of sense. That is smart for Caitlin to do so. And so, she'll be celebrated coming up. The celebrations will be after the game. They didn't want to have a time restraint, so they will celebrate Caitlin after they play USC, their fourth-ranked team in the country. Game is on Fox, and so too are the ceremonies. Now, before I take a couple questions or thoughts here from the YouTube comments, which have been very active, so hello to all of you going on here. I did also want to discuss here Caitlin's latest call that was announced a couple days ago as well from her agents at Excel Sports Management. It's a brilliant group, same group that manages Tiger and Peyton Manning, for example. They passed along that Caitlin will not be going to San Francisco in 2 weeks to compete in NBA All-Star Weekend. I guess there's a chance she's there with State Farm or sponsors. I doubt it, though. But she will not be taking the court on All-Star Saturday night like many in the media had speculated or fans had hoped. I thought it was probably 50-50 at best that she did so. But I think I like this call because, first of all, she's choosing herself. She's saying, hey, this is not what I want to do. This is not what I exactly want to do at this moment. She's choosing her league instead of saying, I to get our league attention or to get more sponsors on board, I got to go to NBA All-Star Weekend. No, she's saying, hey, All-Star Weekend for the W is in Indy this year on July, I think 17th to the 19th, I want to say. And okay, so she plans to compete in that 3-point contest. Did not do it in Phoenix, is not going to do it in February at NBA All-Star Weekend. And so she plans to make her debut at doing all that at Indy's All-Star Weekend, which is awesome. So she's choosing herself. This offseason has been about her. She's not playing in Unrivaled. She did not play overseas. I think this is an important and critical and great time for her to take it easy, to be out of the spotlight, and to work on improving her game in many ways, right? There's always ways she can improve, one of which is just gaining strength, and that's repetition in the weight room with the Fever strength coaches. Secondly, she's working here a little bit with Keith Porter, the new player development coach, who came from Connecticut with head coach Stephanie White. I thought it was odd, almost overkill, that we're seeing Fever post like 15 minutes inside these workouts. If I'm a player, I'm saying, no, this is my private time. I want to work here, or post 1 minute, but let me work here. Now, as any fans out there, obviously you appreciate it. You appreciate all the access and all those different things. I just recognize this is the players' off season. They can work out wherever they want. They can get done whatever they want. And I don't even want to show my opponents what I'm working on, for example. But Caitlin wanted to gain strength. I think if she could put on 5 pounds, 7 pounds, I don't know what she would be most comfortable with. But she was playing so often during this last season. She joked she can't even keep up weight. Just because how often they were playing what seemed like every other day until kind of the Olympic break there. The other thing I think she wants to work more on is floaters. I think she wants to work more on her drives and finishing around the rim or while gliding to the baseline, those sorts of things. We know her shot. We know her distance. She'll keep practicing that, but that's nothing new. I think these other things are new areas that she wants to work on. So this offseason has been about her. She's worked out at Cambridge Fieldhouse as well as Hinkle Fieldhouse because her boyfriend Connor McCaffrey is on the coaching staff there, the Butler men's basketball team, which is awesome. So she has remained in Indy the majority of this offseason. Sure, she's gone away a couple times, returned home to Iowa, those sorts of things, but I think it's fantastic for her and the city and really for the Fever to have her around nearly every day. And she just celebrated her 23rd birthday. So number 22 is no longer 22, but she was 22 when she went to the Taylor Swift concert, by the way. So I thought that was cool. What an off season there for her. But she ultimately elected to decline participating in NBA All-Star Weekend. Good for her. What does that say? It says a couple things. One, about how in demand she is, how popular she is. And it's also says a lot and is a detriment in what is going on with the NBA All-Star Weekend, how it's not relevant, how it's really decreased in interest and been disappointing. I've attended the last several of them. And last year, to me, from the basketball standpoint, the most memorable and highlighted thing there was the battle from beyond the arc with Steph Curry and Sabrina Ionescu. And Sabrina did an outstanding job battling and hanging in till the end, although we did see Steph Curry ultimately win that one. Ken Swift, appreciate your support here. He says, Scott, why can't the Fever take Caitlin Clark on a trip to Europe to help recruit someone like Emma? Says she's always asked about Caitlin in Europe. That's interesting. I think what you might see in the coming years is some WNBA games played over there. Remember, the league is trying to be like the NBA and has a lot of ownership in the WNBA, by the way, and become more national. I was just in Paris covering the Indiana Pacers and what they were playing there in the NBA Global Games. And you know what? One of my biggest takeaway was, Ken, from Adam Silver. It was that you're going to see an announcement here very soon about the creation of a EuroLeague over there for the NBA. I'm not saying this is more teams to play in the NBA. I view it as a separate league, kind of like the G League. But the NBA is hell-bent on going over there. You have the global games with the NBA. I think it'll be very soon that you'll see the WNBA do that. And, of course, Caitlin's your number one attraction. It's just a matter of the willingness of the Fever and obviously some influence from Caitlin. Do they want to do this? Is this good for them? I know Caitlin had a great time with Iowa. I forget where they went, maybe her senior year. I want to say Greece or Paris, one of those great European cities. And these players, if they could get a free flight over there and an opportunity to expose themselves and their game to everything that's going on, why wouldn't you? Ashley says Italy and Croatia. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Where they apparently went a couple of years ago. I've been to Italy. It's phenomenal. I would still love to go to Croatia. But if you're a player, I think you'd be on board with this as long as it fits your schedule and does not ruin a month of your schedule where you're having to play, 4 games in a week because of it. So, yeah, I do expect the league to expand in terms of having a WNBA global games. Maybe it starts with you've already played a game in Toronto, right? Or at least they're going to I think they already did up there in Toronto, and now you're going to see a league there. So that's one expansion out of the country, to be sure. And I think a trip to Europe would be outstanding for the league, for the players, and for the potential growth. Just wrapping up my thought on Caitlin declining All-Stars. Surely there'll be a big sponsor with Indy All-Star Weekend. Maybe it's State Farm, for example, one of her sponsors, because the prize money is just not good enough yet. And again, I think that's something that they will change in the upcoming CBA with the W, because right now participants of the 3-point contest, get this, they get $1,000, $1,000 plus expenses to get there. Winner gets double that, 2,575. That's it. Now, you did see one sponsor in Aflac jump in at the last minute, the last week, a couple of days before that, and say here, we'll give $55,000 also to the winner here. And so good for them to get that done. But I think you need to see more of that. But I respect that decision by Caitlin to choose her league and choose her team and choose the city, quite frankly. Indy's her new home. And so she can make Indy a huge success just by participating in more events. She said she didn't plan to be like the mayor of Indy during that week. I asked her about that, coming off of Indy hosting the NBA All-Star Weekend and Tyrese Halliburton being kind of the unofficial mayor and doing everything. I don't think she'll do anything to that extent, but that's very cool of her to be willing to do that and participate in that event. Last thing I wanted to mention is that Stephanie White, the new Fever head coach, much like Kelly Krauskopf, the new but previous and now back, she was awarded Pro Basketball Writers Association Award today. It was the Ann Donovan Award, second annual time it's been given out, and it's for her outstanding cooperation with media, and absolutely. And part of me gets that too, because she is the media as well in the offseason. She works on ESPN and Big Ten Network. I think she's done some Fox, maybe some Peacock last year, certainly, but primarily ESPN this year. So she's been the media and continues to be when she is not coaching the Fever. So she gets our needs. She understands questions that need to be asked. She recognizes how much that media helps elevate the game, how we as media are the liaison between fans and the team, and try to answer your questions about what's going on with the franchise. Why was that decision made? Why was a change to the starting lineup and such made, for example? So congrats to Stephanie White. No surprise. She's fantastic to deal with. I've known her for several decades, and she is tremendous to work with. That basically wraps up what I had on the docket to talk about here on this live podcast that I'm doing on YouTube. Several hundred of you joining me here, which I really appreciate. And you can follow all my work. Be sure to subscribe at fieldhousefiles.com for all my posts here. But specifically with YouTube, if you guys have any questions, go ahead. We've seen just such a complete changeover of this Fever front office, the coaching staff. And now really this week begins some changes to the player roster. Although you bring Kelsey Mitchell back, Natasha Howard coming back for the first time in almost a decade. Now I think what you really need to go after is another experienced vet here, another player with defensive emphasis. I don't have any specific names for you that I've heard about just yet. There's some obvious ones that do make a lot of sense, but I don't think the Fever are done. Not yet. No, they are locked in on this team, this roster, and want to maximize this season. And they absolutely should. All right, let me get to some of the comments on here. Is Bree on January joining the coaching staff? Yes, that's my expectation. I believe she was the first one to agree to join the staff. And you may not know this, but Bree, who's a draft pick of the Fever, and obviously is aspiring to be a head coach, probably needs a couple more years of experience. But Bree's currently an assistant coach in the G League with the Motor City Cruise, who are in Indianapolis this week. I was hoping to meet up with her to catch up, but they were leaving right after the game, so we were unable to do so. But they will be back here in a couple of weeks. What else? Chris asked if I had to say, do I think NaLyssa Smith gets traded this offseason? I think that's probably the most likely outcome, especially after you add someone like Natasha Howard. I will tell you a lot of her frustration clearly was in the coaching staff and perhaps the head coach previously. You make that change, then maybe your options are open up a little bit. The challenge is sometimes it's difficult to go back. But my initial thought after the season is that she would probably get traded. And I have not heard that to be cleared for certain that it will happen or anything like that. But Chris asked in my gut, yes, I do kind of think they will move on from her. What else here? A lot of negativity in these comments. Let's get rid of that. Let's have constructive comments about the team, about the franchise, about this current direction and where they are headed. I think it's an exciting time for this Indiana Fever team more than ever before, frankly, because of Caitlin. And she's done a nice job of handling all the pressure, all the stress, all the demands that have come her way. And that again is why I like how she's taking this offseason to herself to train and get work done at Hinkle Fieldhouse and Gamebridge Fieldhouse. So um, we'll see. She's going to come back, not with an axe to grind, but remember, she's a competitive player. And she doesn't forget how they didn't pick her for Team USA and a lot of the doubters early on and some of the unnecessary physicality pressed upon her early on. I just laughed the fact that people say, hey, nothing really changes for all these players in the WNBA. They're all treated the same. But then you see the Fever are the only team being picked up 94 feet. Caitlin Clark's being picked up full court. Yes, things are very different for her and will always be different. I can't imagine being 23 years old like she is and having all that spotlight. You had that story come out about a alleged stalker. That's just disgusting. The little things that she's had to deal with here. Savannah says, do you think they could win a championship this year? At the moment, no, but I would give everybody right now an incomplete score. Free agents haven't been able to sign. We don't know what other moves they are efforting and may get done or may not. So right now, this current roster, no. I still think they're probably a couple pieces away from getting that done. And I think they're long from tinkering this roster. I think there's several moves they plan to make. I know they wanted to get involved. We're hoping to get a trade done with the Golden State Valkyries during the expansion draft, but that really didn't work. We saw Golden State not do any of those deals, which surprised me. I know the Fever and Kelly really were looking to see if they could find a way and make that advantageous for them. Have I heard any free agent rumors? I don't really report on rumors and all that stuff. I like to tell you either what I believe, what I know, or what I've been told from credible sources, not from rumors, message boards, anything like that. Coach White coming to Caitlin's retirement jersey. I have not confirmed that, but I would fully expect a huge contingent from the Fever. I would expect the front office. I would expect Steph. I would expect player relations rep Ebony to be there. You probably will have 5 or 6 individuals there, but I hope to have a phone call with a couple people over there to get more details leading up to that retirement ceremony Sunday afternoon at Iowa City. I think the game is, if I remember right, it's at 1:30 Eastern, so the ceremony will probably be 3:45, 4:15 or so. I was gonna go, but there's just limited media opportunities, right? She's planning to do a brief media interview with the media on hand, but that's 5 minutes at max, probably. Then they'll do the on-court ceremony. All that's televised. So I really could not justify going over there. I didn't think it would be worth it just to, be there at a press conference and have a chance of maybe asking one question. Nothing like that. You're welcome, Laura. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're joining on here, and you and everybody else that have jumped on and participated in all of this. Yeah, you appreciate you agree about the negativity, and that's how I am in everything. But it's funny to see off season, and I'm reading criticisms and negativity. We don't need all that. Let's have fun. This is sports. There's a lot of negative in the world, including that terrible plane crash a couple days ago. That stuff's negative. This is not. This is the toy factory of the world. Try to keep your perspective here, because I certainly do. So an option. I don't think so. I don't have that on confirmation. The challenge is, it will take a lot, I think, to get that done. She's definitely probably the hottest free agent that is currently available at the moment. She's obviously cored, so you'd have to swing a trade with the Dallas Wings to get that done. Now, you do have someone on your side that has familiarity with Dallas, right? With Amber Cox coming over from Dallas to make that happen. So that's really cool and something to keep in mind there. Nosy, I looked to see if White was announcing the game. I don't think she is. I don't. It's on Big Fox. I don't think she's doing any Big Fox this year. So just out of that, I'm almost certain she's not. She's mostly been doing NBA games on ESPN, which is awesome. I don't think she's done any college basketball just yet. It's hard to keep track of her schedule. I think she would probably say the same and all that she's doing there. Interesting. Tracer says, I just received an email from Fever about season tickets. They're stating I may not be able to get them. Why can't they open up the balcony for season ticket sales? I have not dealt with any ticket sales or season tickets or anything like that, so I don't have familiarity with that issue, but I will certainly look into it, Tracer there. My guess is, informed opinion here, is that they want to sell season tickets up to the club level, and then you want to have single game tickets. You want to be able to have fans from out of town, out of the country, to be able to get tickets and not just on third-party websites. So that's really why I think you'd hesitate to sell out and do everything as a season ticket. That's also a lot of season ticket holders to take care of, which is complicated. I think it was interesting when before Caitlin was drafted, I think they had 3 consumer ticket sales representatives. Now I think they've like doubled that, maybe tripled that, just because of the sheer volume of people and interest in this franchise. And some franchises sell season tickets just so they can lock in money and guarantee that a ticket sales. This Fever team does not have to worry about that. The only time perhaps maybe they would, if, knock on wood, there was a Clark injury that kept her out for some time. How does that impact attendance? That would be the only time you'd worry about it. But from this standpoint, Fever are good with sheer volume and numbers of interest and all that. They, like others had talked about early on, I think there was a lot of people that were wanting to see games or the All-Star game move to Lucas Oil Stadium, for example. I want an Amber Cox jersey. I'm sure you could customize one. She's the GM, obviously, for those of you who are unfamiliar. Has worked in soccer, has previously worked with the Dallas Wings and the Phoenix Mercury, been in the league for 2+ decades. That's why she has familiarity with Kelly Kroskoff, who hired her. She's the team president, and Kelly's brilliant in basketball, the original architect of this Fever franchise. A couple more questions here before I wrap up this live podcast. Savannah says, what are you looking forward to this upcoming season? I would say how the new coaching staff directly impacts the team. We heard a lot of negativity about coaches last year. I think I'm a big fan of Stephanie and her body of work and how she knows the city and this franchise. I think coaching, how does that make a significant difference? I'm curious to see the individual growth from Caitlin this offseason and how she's much more prepared and familiar with what to expect in the league. And then also some continuity, how her and Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston and Alexi Hall all vibe and are on the same page after having a full season together. Because remember, they didn't have a true training camp together. They didn't have a lot of time together until the Olympic break. And then you saw them take off. Didn't they win like 8 of 10 games? That was not a surprise. There's a big value in practice time and in time together spent off the court, and not just playing a game every other day. Yes, they said I would be able to get single game tickets and playoff tickets. There you go. Yeah, so that tracks. I'm stoked to be in Cambridge. Yeah, me too. Those games are fun, and there's nothing like those Fever experiences now. I tell you what, I mean, the year before, there was probably 2 or 3 of us media at those games. They weren't televised, certainly some even locally. There were games that were on Facebook.com, about 7 of them, I think, the previous year. Things are completely different. I could go on for an hour just about the differences from one year to the next. Steph White's the truth. Yep, I would agree with that. Smith with Mabry would be nice. It would, but I'm not sure why they would do that. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Katie says, I also got that email about tickets. That's interesting. Gotcha. Yeah. Do you think the new refs will make a difference? I haven't heard too much about that, so I don't want to speak on that, as that something like that has not been announced until before the season about directions they're going there with new refs. I'm not sure what you're referencing there. Can All-Stars be moved to Lucas Oil? I guess technically it could. Maybe what you do is make All-Star Saturday night there, headlined by Caitlin in the three-point contest. Then it would be a same setup as we had in February last year for the NBA All-Star game. I believe you'll see the W All-Star game, though, at Gainbridge Fieldhouse Sunday or that day without a doubt. The question is, do you move another event like Saturday there to Lucas Oil? What about draft picks? Are they going to keep it? I think that's a situation there where they are in win now mode. So if it takes a draft pick to go and get a win now player, go get a player who has a title or go and has that experience, you're not in a mode right now where you're just trying to acquire draft capital, other than for a reason maybe to then build up draft capital to go trade something. So, yeah, that's something to watch here, just in terms of the assets that the Fever have and how they choose to ultimately use those assets to further this team. It's rumor that they hired new refs. All right. Well, I haven't heard those rumors. Again, I don't really deal with rumors. I deal with either what someone directly told me or what I can report. There's several officials I really like in the league. Generally speaking, I think there needs to be an upgrade in the WNBA officials. I think that's something that's lagged behind here over the last decade. But as you get more money, as you get more resources, as you get more attention on the league, that will force some of those upgrades to ultimately happen here. So we shall see. See there, Katie asks, who would I go after in free agency in the draft? We'll see about the draft until free agency. I do like how it is done in the WNBA where free agency is held before the draft. I would like to see that really in the NBA, even though the scheduling isn't great, because I think it's odd that before you figure out what veterans and experienced players you have on your NBA roster, you have the draft. Then 10 days later is free agency. I like how this is done both in the NFL and in the NBA as well. So I don't really have an opinion on any of these draft players. We're not even certain who exactly is coming out. For example, Paige Beckers, we all assume, but I don't think that is necessarily for certain. There hadn't been any announcement, anything like that. Satu Sabali, of course, a team like the Fever would like. The challenge is everybody's going to be wanting her, and it's going to take a trade to get that done because she was cored by Dallas. But also, she made clear in a Zoom over on during our Unrivaled press conferences here a couple weeks ago that she will not be back in Dallas. So she did make that clear, and that does force the hand a little bit of Dallas to make sure a deal does get done. All right, just a couple more. El Professor, thanks for the support here. If you ever need to draft, yeah, those are all good options for sure. And I think what of the Fever, the 6th draft pick, I think ultimately. So there are a couple good options certainly right there. Challenges right now, they have a lot of youth. They have young players like a Grace Berger who doesn't have minutes even to get in right now. They had a player in Celeste Taylor they didn't have room for. I still don't know why you draft her and then waive her when you could have had Kate Martin, for example, and not only taking care of Caitlin, but brought in a tough, defensive-minded, winning player. That was the old regime, though. But yeah, with the draft, you shore up free agency, you see what pieces you have. Maybe you keep the pick, maybe you go with a younger player, but right now this is a win mode team. They're ready to go now. They want to throw they want to throw gasoline on the fire that is going right now, rather than last year before Caitlin, they were just trying to light the fire and see if there was any excitement with this team or any reason for optimism. Yeah, rookie contracts will be much bigger next year. That's fully my expectation as well. What are your thoughts on other fan bases calling the Fever a super team? I have not heard that, and no, they are not a super team. You have Caitlin. You have Aaliyah, who's only a second-year player going into year 3, so she hasn't, in my mind, ascended to a superstar or anything status. Yeah, they have a couple all-stars, but so do several other teams. Super teams, I think of the Aces previously. I think of the Liberty, who just won the title. The Fever are not a super team at all right now. After the Howard signing, Nosy asked, do the Fever have the cap space for Sato? Do they? I do not know what the money deal is just yet in Natasha Howard. They did have room for another max contract. I'm not sure what Natasha's money looks like. Therefore, I'm not sure how it directly impacts the CBA just yet. But they were able to re-sign Kelsey Mitchell for the Supermax. They had another max roster spot. Maybe they do something with Katie Lou's salary, which I think is $150,000. Maybe that, and that's where you perhaps spend some draft capital to get off a contract like that if the coaching staff does not have plans for her here in the future. Don't know if they're going to keep the pick, as I've said. Again, I think that that to be determined based on free agency. What happened to assistant coach Jessie Miller? She was released. So was Paul Miller. He's landed on as a assistant scouting role up at down at IU in Bloomington as Paul Miller. Jessie Miller, I have not heard what she is up to. That is a good ending point. I've went almost an hour here on YouTube Live and this live podcast recording. I appreciate everyone for jumping on here. El Professor, Ken, thank you for your support, as well as everybody else for logging on, subscribing to my YouTube channel, and check me out at fieldhousefiles.com. Go ahead, subscribe there. I'm going to have a new article coming up today on Natasha Howard, plus some Pacer stories, as well as I'll be at Royal Rumble WWE covering Tyrese Halliburton, maybe some Fever involvement, Pat McAfee's involvement. So it's a big weekend in Indy and a big week, to be clear, absolutely, for this Indiana Fever roster. So a lot going on, and I'll have you covered right here on my YouTube channel, on my Fieldhouse Files podcast, and at fieldhousefiles.com. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I'll talk to you again soon.